So I gave ChatGPT, Gemini, and Claude the exact same prompt: build me a working Flappy Bird clone from scratch. No extra context, no hints, no guidance. Just one prompt and 3 rounds of increasingly harder challenges to see which one could actually keep up. But this video isn't really about who builds the best Flappy Bird clone. That part's almost beside the point. What I was actually trying to find out was something a little more interesting: how each of these 3 AIs thinks, how they behave under pressure, where they put their attention, because once you push them past a single prompt and into something that has to evolve and grow over time, you start seeing patterns. And those patterns tell you a lot more about which AI to use and when than any single result ever could. Welcome back to the channel. My name is Bob, and on this channel, I'm building a faceless AI YouTube channel, completely in public. The real tools, the real results, and no fluff. Today we're doing something a little different than usual. Instead of the standard workflow breakdown, I ran a structured head-to-head test between the 3 biggest free AI models right now, and what started as a coding test turned into something more like a behavioral study. So let me walk you through how it worked, because the structure of the test matters a lot. There were 3 rounds in total. Round 1 was the foundation. Just build a working Flappy Bird clone with pipes, a score counter, and a game over screen. Simple enough on paper. Round 2 pushed it further. I asked each AI to take their working game and add 4 specific features on top of it: a high score that saves between sessions, a difficulty system that ramps up every 5 points, sound effects for flapping and dying, and a full day-to-night background cycle, all while keeping everything that already worked intact. And round 3, well, I'm not going to tell you about that one just yet. What I will say is that round 3 is where you really start to see how each AI behaves when the complexity stops being manageable from a single prompt. The rules were simple: same prompt for all 3, word for word. Same conversation, no restarting, free version of each one, no paid plans, no premium tiers, just what most people actually have access to. All right, let's get into round 1. ChatGPT was up first. I pasted in the prompt and it just worked. First try. The bird jumps when you press spacebar, the pipes come in from the right, the score ticks up as you pass through them, and the game over screen shows up when you crash. It was all there, all functional. I played for about 10 seconds just to make sure everything responded properly, and it did. The start screen ChatGPT built was clean. A Flappy Bird title, a hint that says press space or tap to fly, a yellow start game button, and a little tagline at the bottom about beating your high score. It looked nice, but also a little static. It felt like a template that had been filled in correctly rather than something that was actually designed for this specific game. One thing I want to flag before we move on: ChatGPT doesn't give you a download button. It just hands you the code as a block of text in the chat, and you have to manually copy it, create an HTML file yourself, paste it in, save it, and then open it in a browser. It's not the end of the world, but it's friction. And it's a small signal of something we're going to come back to. All right, so that was ChatGPT. Now let's move over to Gemini and see how Google's free AI handled the exact same prompt. I opened a fresh conversation, pasted in the identical prompt, and the first difference was already there before I'd even looked at the game. Gemini gave me a direct download button for the file. Just click, save it, open it in the browser. No copy pasting, no creating files manually, no extra steps. Now, on its own, that sounds like a tiny thing, but it's worth pausing on for a second because 2 AIs got the same prompt, and one of them thought past, give them the code, and into, what's the easiest way for them to actually use this code? That's a different layer of thinking entirely. ChatGPT solved the prompt, Gemini solved the prompt, and also thought about delivery. We'll come back to that. The game itself worked on the first try, and the look was already noticeably different. Gemini's version was more minimalist visually, darker background, faint grid lines, a simpler bird. But when I played it for about 10 seconds, the gameplay actually felt more aggressive than ChatGPT's version. Tighter pipes, more weight on the bird, faster pacing. It played like Gemini had actually thought about what makes Flappy Bird fun, not just what makes it run. And now, Claude. Same prompt, fresh conversation. This one looked completely different from the first second. Claude went straight for a retro pixel art aesthetic, hot pink border frame around the game, starry purple-black background, a detailed yellow bird with actual character to it, red ground at the bottom. It looks like a finished arcade game rather than a coding exercise. I played Claude's round one for a bit and it felt smooth. The bird had more personality, the animation when it flapped had a small bounce to it, and there was already some subtle motion in the background that the other two didn't have. But the thing that really stood out had nothing to do with the visuals. Claude added a high score system that saves between sessions automatically without me asking for it. That feature was specifically supposed to come in round 2. It was part of the next prompt. Claude just looked at the request, decided that a high score made sense for a game like this, and built it in. So before we move to round 2, let me pause here and pull out what round 1 already showed us, because there are patterns here even at this early stage, and they're worth noticing. ChatGPT solved the literal prompt. It built exactly what was asked. Nothing more, nothing less. It didn't think past the instruction. The start screen was a template, the gameplay was basic, and even the way the code was delivered required extra steps for me to actually use it. That's not a flaw, it's a style. ChatGPT executes what's in front of it cleanly and stops there. Gemini solved the prompt and started thinking around it. It thought about delivery, hence the download button. It thought about game feel, hence the tighter difficulty and more responsive controls. The visuals were minimal, but the design instincts behind them were already showing up. Claude solved the prompt and started thinking ahead of it. It built a feature from round 2 before round 2 even existed. It also went hardest on visual identity. Claude clearly made an aesthetic decision about what this game should look like and committed to it. So already, just from one prompt, you can see 3 different ways of approaching the same problem. ChatGPT stays inside the box. Gemini optimizes the box. Claude tries to anticipate what's outside it. Keep that pattern in mind because it gets louder. All right, on to round 2. I sent the same follow-up to all 3, continuing in the exact same conversation so each AI had the full context of what it had already built. The prompt was this: add a high score that saves between sessions, a difficulty system where the pipes get faster every 5 points, sound effects for flapping and dying, and a day-to-night background cycle that changes over time, and keep everything that already works. 4 specific features. Let's see what happened. ChatGPT added all 4. The high score saves, the pipes get faster, the sound effects are there, and the background does change between day and night. On paper, that's 4 out of 4. But the way it executed them was a bit underwhelming. The day to night cycle wasn't really a cycle. It just switched to nighttime and stayed there. Full dark sky, dark clouds, no transition. The word cycle implies something that loops or breathes, but ChatGPT read it more literally and just shifted the game into night mode. I played for about 15 seconds and the background never moved back. The sound effects technically check the box. Each action gets a distinct sound, but I personally didn't enjoy them. They sounded more like system beeps than game audio. Now let's head over to Gemini. Gemini's round 2 was honestly more impressive in a lot of ways. The graphics got better, the sound effects fit the game properly, and Gemini added something I didn't even ask for. A visible speed indicator that shows your current difficulty level on screen in real time as your score increases. A little speed 1.0x badge that sits right under the score and ticks up as you hit thresholds. That's actually a meaningful design choice. The prompt asked for a difficulty system, and Gemini built one. But it also asked itself, how does the player know the difficulty is changing? And added a visible indicator so the system was transparent. That's the same pattern from round 1. Gemini doesn't just execute the prompt. It thinks about how the prompt feels to the person using it. But there's a downside to that instinct here. When I played Gemini's round 2 for a while, the difficulty scaling was so aggressive that the game became almost unplayable past 20 points. The system was beautifully designed and perfectly visualized and tuned to the point where you couldn't actually play it for long. So Gemini's strength, caring about presentation and feel, also became its blind spot. It optimized for showing the system, not for the game being fun. And then there's Claude. Claude's round 2 is where the gap actually got hard to ignore. All 4 features were there, but the way they came together felt different. The high score saved cleanly, the difficulty ramped up in a way that stayed playable, the sound effects were well placed, and the day to night cycle, this is the one. Claude built a full atmospheric transition, morning to day to evening to night, gradually. When I played it for around 15 seconds, I watched the sky shift through warm oranges and deep reds before slowly turning into a starlit black, without me asking for that level of detail. The prompt said day to night cycle, Claude interpreted it as something that should feel like time passing. That's the same pattern from round 1, just bigger. ChatGPT built what the word said. Gemini built it and added a layer of UX thinking. Claude built it and added a layer of atmosphere and intent. There's also something else I noticed while playing. There's motion in Claude's game that I didn't see in the others. Some parallax in the background, some movement in the ground. It's not perfectly cohesive throughout. Sometimes elements move and sometimes they don't, depending on the state of the game. But the instinct to add motion was there. So before round 3, let me pull out what this round revealed. ChatGPT translated the prompt word for word into features. Day to night became a literal switch from day to night. Sound effects became distinct sounds for distinct events. Each feature exists. Each feature does what it says. There's a kind of reliability to that. You'll get exactly what you ask for. No surprises, no creative reinterpretations, but you also won't get anything you didn't ask for. Gemini interpreted the prompt through a design lens. It thought about how the features would be experienced. The visible speed counter is the clearest example of that. But its instinct to design every detail, well, sometimes overrides its instinct to make sure the underlying thing actually works as a whole. The difficulty was beautifully visualized and almost unplayable. That's a real pattern, not a one-off. Claude interpreted the prompt through what feels like an intent lens. It seems to be asking, what's the point of this feature, and how do I build it so it actually achieves that? A day-to-night cycle exists to add atmosphere, so Claude built atmosphere. Sound effects exist to give feedback, so Claude made them feel like game feedback. The features stay focused on what they were supposed to do for the experience. Again, none of this is about which AI is best. It's about 3 completely different ways of approaching the same prompt, and those styles are going to matter even more in round 3. So here's the round 3 prompt. Add a complete skin system with 3 unlockable birds. The default bird is already unlocked. The second bird unlocks when the player reaches a high score of 10, and the third unlocks at 25. Add a skin selector screen before the game starts that clearly shows which skins are locked and which are unlocked. Each bird should look visually distinct from the others. This is a different kind of challenge from rounds 1 and 2. It's not just adding a new feature, it's asking the AI to hold the full memory of everything it's already built, design a brand new UI screen that didn't exist before, manage unlock states that persist between sessions, create 3 characters that feel distinct from each other, and connect all of it back into the game without touching anything that already worked. A lot of moving parts at once. ChatGPT built the skin selector. And finally, Claude's round 3. Quick note before I get into it, the first time Claude tried to render the file, it came out broken and nothing would open. But that genuinely wasn't Claude's fault. My laptop battery died in the middle of the render and corrupted the output. I told Claude what happened, asked it to try again, and the second attempt is what you're seeing here. What Claude built was 3 named themed birds, Sunny Classic, Frost the Ice Bird, and Ember the Firebird. Each one has a distinct visual identity that fits the retro pixel art aesthetic Claude established back in round 1. The high score sits at the top, the speed counter sits at the bottom, the day-night indicator shows you what time it currently is. Every system from rounds 1 and 2 is still working. The sunset still happens, the sound effects are still there, the difficulty progression still ramps up cleanly. When you actually pick a skin, say you switch to Frost, the bird in game changes to the blue one. I played for about 15 seconds with the new skin and everything that came before was intact. The new feature was layered cleanly on top. One honest note though, the skins look different but they play exactly the same. There's no special ability per bird, no different physics, no unique sounds for each skin. It's purely cosmetic, which is technically what the prompt asked for, but it's worth pointing out so you know what Claude did and didn't do here. Alright, so let's pull the whole round and the whole test together. ChatGPT is a literal executor. It reads the prompt, it builds the prompt, and that's the job done. The strength of that is predictability. You know roughly what you're getting, and you're rarely surprised. The trade-off is that when you start stacking complexity on top of complexity, ChatGPT tends to focus so hard on the latest instruction that it lets older parts of the system fall apart. That's why the sound effects disappeared in round 3. That's why the day to night was a switch and not a cycle. The current prompt gets all the attention, and the wider system gets less. Gemini is a design-first thinker. It cares about how things are delivered, how things look, how things feel to use. The download button in round 1, the visible speed counter in round 2, the polished skin selector in round 3. Those are all signals of an AI that thinks about the user, not just the request. The trade-off is that design instincts can sometimes overpower practical instincts. The most beautifully built system in the world doesn't matter if you can't actually reach it because the difficulty wall is too high. Gemini designs well, and sometimes needs you to pull it back into reality. Claude is an intent-driven builder. It seems to ask itself what each feature is supposed to achieve, not just what it's supposed to be. A day-to-night cycle becomes atmospheric and gradual because that's the point of a day-to-night cycle. A high score in round 1 gets added before round 2 because the game obviously needs 1. Round 3 layers on without breaking round 1 or 2 because Claude treats the conversation as one continuous system. The trade-off is that this kind of approach can produce things you didn't quite ask for. Claude committed to a retro pixel art aesthetic from the first prompt and rolled with it, which works here, but won't always be what someone wants. So, which AI should you use? Honestly, depends on the work. If you want literal execution and predictability, something where the prompt is detailed and you want it built exactly that way, ChatGPT will give you that. If you care about how things look and feel and you're comfortable correcting things when they get over-designed, Gemini's instincts are genuinely strong. You just have to keep an eye on practical usability. If you're working on something that needs to grow over multiple prompts, where you need the AI to remember earlier work and build coherently on top of it, where you want the AI to anticipate intent rather than just follow instructions, that's where Claude felt the most impressive across all 3 rounds. If you want my honest gut take across the full test, Claude went the furthest beyond what was actually asked in a way that consistently produced something better than the literal prompt. That doesn't mean it's the right answer for every situation, but for this particular kind of work, that's what stood out to me. And actually, if you want to see what Claude looks like when I'm not testing it against other AIs, but actually using it for real work, I made a full video on this channel a little while back called From Idea to Upload Automating YouTube with Claude AI. It's the full breakdown of how I use Claude to run pretty much every part of my YouTube workflow: research, scripting, structure, the whole pipeline. After running this test, it'll probably make a lot more sense why I built that workflow around Claude specifically.